Well, we have the pleasure of the company of His Excellency Ambassador Antonio de Aguiar Patriota, the Chairman of the Peacebuilding Commission, and His Excellency Oscar Fernandez Tarranco, the Assistant UN Secretary General for Peacebuilding Support. Gentlemen, I would like to again welcome you back, welcome you to Cairo. And two quick questions. First, a lot that we have heard today about the potential for the Peacebuilding Commission. I think that was reflected clearly in many of the questions and many of the comments that that were made today. And as the chairman of the Peacebuilding Commission, I would like to ask you, what do you make of that, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I'm a strong believer in the Peacebuilding Commission and the kind of possibilities that it offers. Of course, it can be made even more useful if the member states engage more directly. But I could highlight at least two aspects in which the PBC has a unique potential. First, by bringing together the main stakeholders around a specific conflict or crisis, the neighboring countries, the donors, the permanent members of the Security Council, and a cross-section of countries and participants, as well as its advisory role to the Security Council and its possibility to engage with international financial institutions. That's one. The second aspect is that above and beyond what the Security Council does, which is quite restricted to the, let's say, security element, the military aspect, or the stemming of violence, the negotiation of ceasefires, the Peacebuilding Commission can also look at a broader spectrum of issues. It looks at the relationship between, yes, security, but also political and institutional development and reconciliation, economic development, social justice, social programs. So if you put those two together, you really have a quite unique platform. Now, what this seminar helps us to do is to look at past experiences, see where maybe we have been able to strike some successes, and look at the shortcomings with a view to the 2015 review, where hopefully we can strengthen the functioning of the PBC in ways that benefit the largest possible number of people.
Ambassador Tarranco, sitting in the Peacebuilding Support Office, same question. A lot have been said today about the Peacebuilding Commission and its untapped potential, if we can put it this way. What's your views on that?
Yes, well, thank you for giving us this opportunity to be here in Cairo and to reflect upon these very important issues. Sitting from the Peacebuilding Support Office, I think supporting the work of the Peacebuilding Commission becomes essential. First of all, because as we've seen in the discussions today, the Peacebuilding Commission and the country-specific configurations of the Peacebuilding Commission are extremely important instruments to support the work that the special representatives of the Secretary General have in implementing Security Council mandates, both in peacekeeping operations and in special political missions. And so how the Peacebuilding Support Office is able to provide both substantive, analytical support to the work of the Peacebuilding Commission becomes essential. Much of the recommendations that is also coming from the Peacebuilding Commission in the form of further studies or preparedness, for example, in the case of starting to draw the attention of member states and the UN system to thinking about the post-Ebola recovery efforts that will be needed once the medical response and the emergency response have been completed. So thinking about how to strengthen the institutions, the political processes that build inclusivity and address the priority needs of the people, of the countries in which a lot of the peace-building efforts are happening, becomes, if you will, the way we're able to organize our work in support. And last but not least is also linking a lot of the dialogue that is enhanced by the Peacebuilding Commission in bringing the relevant actors around the table to discuss some of the priority matters, is to also align some of the financing that can actually go to address and respond to some of those immediate needs that have to do with, many times, reconciliation efforts, national dialogue efforts, to bring inclusivity and to address root causes of conflict.
Ambassador Patriota, on a couple of occasions today, at least, there was a mention of the relationship between the Peacebuilding Commission and the Security Council. And some have actually went to the extent of questioning, at least, whether the Peacebuilding Commission has the full support of the Security Council. Now, my first question to you is, to what extent you think this is true? And if it is true, what is it that we can do about it? How can the upcoming review address this issue, if there is any way?
Well, first of all, I would point out that through the resolutions that created the Peacebuilding Commission, the 5 permanent members of the Security Council are automatically members of the PBC. So my suggestion, if there's any doubt or skepticism on the part of anyone of the P5 about the usefulness of the PBC, well, they should engage more actively within the PBC because they are sitting there as well. And maybe I'll tell you a little story about a recent dialogue I had with one of the permanent members who showed some skepticism. He said, well, we would like to see the PBC delivering more, being more effective. And I said, well, it's true, the PBC has not been effective in every single case, but I think we would be much worse off without the PBC because it is delivering on a number of fronts in Guinea-Bissau and Sierra Leone. And even where it is not, things would have been worse if the PBC had not intervened. And frankly, if we look at the performance of the Security Council, well, the membership also believes that maybe it's not delivering all that well in a number of situations. Syria, Palestine, and Israel, to name but a few, Ukraine maybe, and others. So, you know, these organs are only as effective as member states allow them to be. And I think what can be said about Security Council and PBC and much of the UN is that they are struggling to do as much as they can with the resources they have, but they're only as effective as the political will of member states.
Picking up on the issue of the resources, there was quite a discussion today about the relationship between the peace-building architecture at large, your office, the Peacebuilding Commission, and the Peacebuilding Fund with the international financial institutions, with the work that has already been done. I mean, one of the participants said Peacebuilding Commission, Peacebuilding Fund are not a development agency, and they should not be. What's your views on that? Future relationship, better coordination between the Peacebuilding Commission, the Peacebuilding Fund, and your office with the international financial institutions and with development agencies.
Yes. Well, again, you know, peace building has evolved a lot since the establishment of the peace building architecture. And today, when we look as, you know, who are the actors of peace building, I think it's extremely important to see how much has changed in the way the UN has become involved in peace-building activities on the ground. I mean, the operational departments of the UN, and namely, you know, the Department of Peacekeeping Operation, Department of Political Affairs, many of the resident coordinators of the UN country team, these are the real operational entities, at least from the UN side. And these are exactly the departments, the entities, the missions that need to be strengthened and supported through this architecture. The Peacebuilding Commission is not an operational body. The Peacebuilding Support Office is not an operational body. But what it does do is create the very important space for dialogue to actually reflect on what is the strategy, what are the priorities, and how can we you know, construct a coherent strategic engagement that addresses root causes of conflict. And here the funding that the Peacebuilding Fund is able to allocate is usually based on a political analysis. Peace building is an eminently political process. It's not a development, if you will, but where we need to articulate the peace and security issues, to link it with development issues, link it with human rights issues, link it with the response to the humanitarian intervention. So it's about articulating a strategy and responding to the needs on the ground. And I think the Peacebuilding Commission can play a very important complementary role to the Security Council, precisely because of that issue of the long-term sustained attention that is required. Institution building reconciliation are generational processes. These are not things that you do in 1 or 2 or 3 years. It requires a sustained attention, reinforcement, engagement of the key stakeholders within a country, but equally important, the neighboring states and the regional organizations.
Okay, so Peacebuilding Commission is a very useful tool in creating space for engagement. And now turning back to the discussion of, of our workshop, regional aspects of peacebuilding. A relationship between the Peacebuilding Architecture, Peacebuilding Commission, and regional and sub-regional organization, which has consumed much of the discussion today. It's a two-way street, isn't it? As you look forward for the review upcoming, as the chairman of the Peacebuilding Commission, what would you like to see coming out of the review, in particular with regards to the regional aspects of peace building, better coordination between the Peacebuilding Commission, as Ambassador Tarranco just mentioned, Peacebuilding Commission and the peacebuilding architecture within the UN with the regional organizations, in the case of Africa, the African Union, and the sub-regional groups?
Well, what I'd like to see actually is a process where member states can take the lead and learn from past experiences, which is one of the reasons why we're trying to base the review on some case studies. And we will be looking both at country-specific configuration countries, such as Burundi and Sierra Leone, that can be considered comparatively positive, as well as Central African Republic, which is a problematic case because there was relapse into conflict. But we will also be looking at South Sudan, which is not presently in the agenda as a country-specific configuration, and Timor-Leste, which is even outside Africa, to see what comparisons can be made and lessons can be drawn. I believe that one of the objectives is perhaps using the words of Assistant Secretary General Oscar Fernandez Tarranco, more flexible and dynamic PBC in the future. What do we mean by more flexible? Maybe other ways of dealing with situations in just the country-specific configuration, maybe a lighter footprint type of focus, more of a preventive role. There was quite a bit of discussion about this today. And in fact, if you do your job well done as PBC, you are in many ways preventing relapse and helping to show the way forward for many countries, and even maybe showing examples that can be replicated elsewhere. In terms of the regional engagement with Africa, I think there's a consensus here in Cairo that it's desirable to have very active and interactive engagement between the PBC and the African Union on one hand, and also the sub-regional organizations. Myself, I also wear the hat of the Guinea-Bissau country-specific configuration, and I found it extremely useful to be in touch with ECOWAS on one hand, and also very gratifying to see that today ECOWAS and the community of Portuguese-speaking countries that include several African countries are speaking with one voice and are supporting what is going on in Guinea-Bissau through the new democratically elected government in ways that I believe will help to pave forward a path of prosperity and progress for the country. So these are some of the ideas, but I think it would be a little bit premature for me to say what will come out of the review. It has to be member-driven with inputs from an expert group that is going to be created, and also from the Secretariat with this experience of the case studies that we will have before us. And hopefully we will have an improved tool at our disposal to promote peace in ways that is sustainable and long-lasting for the largest possible number of people.
And finally, I want to pick on the issue of early warning and conflict prevention. One of the statements that were made today, I think it was by Special Representative Parfait Onanga, was about that every post-conflict situation is a potential pre-conflict situation. The whole idea of the role that can be played and is being played by the peace-building architecture in preventing the relapse. Where do you stand on this issue?
Well, I think
the active involvement of the peace-building architecture in interfering before the conflict takes place, because it seemed like others are suggesting, well, maybe we should test what the PBC is doing now and see if it's actually performing at its full potential before we add additional responsibilities?
No, it's a very good question, and I think this is something that we hope will come out as a result of the case studies that Ambassador Patriota was just referring to. In every post-conflict situation, the issue of how the management of relationships between state and citizens is an issue that either progresses in a trajectory of peace building or rising political tensions. And so to prevent, and this is at the heart of the establishment of the Peacebuilding Commission, was to prevent the relapse into violence. So in order to prevent the relapse back to violence, one needs to consistently be looking into issues of rising social tensions, rising inequalities, issues of marginalizations, issues of exclusion, issues of political processes that are not seen as inclusive. And many times, as we have seen in many cases, elections can be a triggering point. And so how the Peacebuilding Commission is able to support these preventive undertakings, which usually have to do with doing quiet diplomacy, which has to do with engaging local mediations, as to having very discreet talks with the neighboring countries, because the neighboring countries, again, can be either a very important factor to help resolve the tensions, or can actually be, at times, factors that tend to rise the tensions. So this very important aspect of quiet diplomacy, the linkage between the good office's efforts, both of the Secretary General or the African Union and other regional organizations, all of these efforts of mediation and dialogue, etc., need to be well coordinated, because otherwise we can actually end up creating more polarization and confusion than cohesion. So again, the Peace Building Fund at times can help finance some of these processes of consultation, of building on some of the important recommendations that could be coming out of some very discrete mediation efforts. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is actually become much more responsive, much more flexible, and rapid, because the windows for peace building and reconciliation must not be taken for granted. This requires a lot of proactive engagement. So.
Chairman Patriota, Ambassador Tarranco, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your stay in Cairo. Thank you.